The morning sun cast long shadows across the glass towers of downtown Seattle as Maya pulled into the parking garage of TechFlow Dynamics. She adjusted her rearview mirror one last time, taking a deep breath before stepping out of her modest Honda Civic. Today would be different from any other day in her 15-year career in tech. Maya had deliberately chosen her outfit the night before. A simple black blazer, comfortable flats, and a leather portfolio that had seen better days. Nothing that screamed executive. Nothing that would give away what she really was. She wanted to blend in, to see the company as it truly operated when no one was watching. The elevator ride to the 15th floor felt longer than usual. Other employees filed in and out, most buried in their phones or clutching coffee cups like lifelines. Maya observed their interactions, noting the casual friendships, the tired faces, the way people naturally grouped together or stood apart. When the doors opened, she was greeted by the familiar buzz of an open office environment. Dozens of workstations stretched across the floor, separated by low cubicle walls and punctuated by glass-walled meeting rooms. The energy felt different from her previous visits to the company. This time she wasn't the visiting executive being shown the polished version of everything. "You must be Maya," said a voice behind her. She turned to see Tom Rodriguez, the HR manager, approaching with a warm smile. They had spoken several times over the past month, but today he played his part perfectly, treating her like any other new employee. "That's me," Maya replied, shaking his hand. "Ready for my first day." Tom led her through the office, past clusters of engineers hunched over multiple monitors, their screens filled with lines of code that seemed to dance in the fluorescent light. The familiar smell of coffee and the quiet hum of keyboards created an atmosphere Maya knew well from her own engineering days. "We're having our monthly all-hands meeting in about an hour," Tom explained as they walked. "Perfect timing for you to meet everyone at once." Maya nodded, already feeling the curious glances from nearby employees. She caught snippets of conversation as they passed. "New consultant, maybe? Probably another diversity hire. Wonder what project she's on." Derek Walsh looked up from his workstation as they approached his area. At 38, he was one of the senior engineers, someone who had been with the company for nearly 8 years. His desk was organized chaos, multiple monitors, cable management solutions that actually worked, and a collection of energy drink cans that suggested long nights debugging code. "Derek, I'd like you to meet Maya," Tom said. "She'll be working closely with leadership on some special projects." Derek stood up, extending his hand with a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. Maya shook it, noting his firm grip and the way he sized her up in those first few seconds. "Nice to meet you," Derek said. "What kind of special projects?" "Operational efficiency, mostly," Maya replied, keeping her answer deliberately vague. "Looking at how different departments work together." "Ah," Derek nodded, though his expression suggested he wasn't entirely convinced. "Consulting work, then." The conversation was interrupted by the arrival of Jessica Kim, a junior developer who had started just 6 months earlier. She was young, eager, and still had that bright enthusiasm that hadn't been worn down by years in corporate environments. "Is this the new team member?" Jessica asked, practically bouncing on her feet. "Maya," she introduced herself, appreciating the genuine warmth in Jessica's greeting. "I love your portfolio," Jessica said, pointing to the leather case Maya carried. "It looks like it has stories to tell." Maya smiled. "It definitely does. This thing has been with me through a lot of late nights and tough projects." As more people gathered around, Maya found herself naturally drawn into conversations about the company, the projects people were working on, and the challenges they faced. She listened more than she spoke, filing away comments about outdated systems, communication gaps between departments, and frustrations with upper management. Derek, meanwhile, had stepped back to observe. Maya caught him whispering to another engineer, Brad Chen, who glanced her way and shrugged. Their body language suggested skepticism, maybe even annoyance. "Attention, everyone," came an announcement over the office intercom. "All-hands meeting starts in 10 minutes in the main conference room." The office began to empty as people saved their work and grabbed their coffee cups. Maya followed the crowd, noting how naturally people formed small groups as they walked. Derek had positioned himself with a cluster of senior engineers, while Jessica chatted excitedly with other junior developers. The main conference room was the company's pride, a modern space with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city, equipped with the latest video conferencing technology and comfortable chairs that actually supported your back during long meetings. Maya chose a seat toward the middle of the room, not too close to the front where executives typically sat, but not in the back where people might hide. She wanted to observe and be observed, to see how people reacted to her presence. Derek and his group settled a few rows behind her. Their conversation was just loud enough for her to catch fragments. "Probably cost more than my salary," Derek was saying. "These consulting gigs are such a waste of budget." "Maybe she's actually qualified," suggested another voice, though it lacked conviction. "Come on, Brad," Derek replied. "Look around. When was the last time they brought in a consultant who actually understood what we do here? They always promise the world and deliver PowerPoint presentations." Maya kept her expression neutral, though internally she was taking notes. This wasn't just about her. This was about how the company approached change, how employees felt about management decisions, and what kind of culture had developed over the years. Robert Sterling, the outgoing CEO, entered the room and the conversations gradually died down. He was a man in his early 60s with graying hair and the kind of presence that commanded attention without effort. Maya had worked with Robert extensively over the past 3 months as they planned this transition. "Good morning, everyone," Robert began, his voice carrying easily across the room. "I know you're all busy, so I'll keep this brief. I want to introduce someone who'll be working with us on some important initiatives." He gestured toward Maya, who stood up and gave a small wave to the room. "This is Maya Chen," Robert continued. "She brings a wealth of experience in operational efficiency and will be working closely with leadership to help us identify opportunities for improvement." The polite applause that followed was punctuated by the kind of murmurs that suggested people were already forming opinions. Maya caught Derek rolling his eyes at Brad, who stifled a laugh. "Maya will be spending time with different teams over the coming weeks," Robert explained. "I encourage everyone to be open and honest with her about your experiences here. Her insights will help us make TechFlow an even better place to work." As the meeting shifted to quarterly updates and project status reports, Maya found herself studying the faces around her. Most people seemed genuinely engaged with the company's progress, asking thoughtful questions and offering suggestions. But she also noticed the subtle signs of frustration, the crossed arms, the sideways glances, the whispered side conversations. When the meeting ended, people began filing out in the same small groups they'd entered with. Derek's voice carried over the general chatter as people gathered their things. "Great, another efficiency expert," he said, making no effort to lower his voice. "Because what we really need is someone who's never written a line of code telling us how to do our jobs better." Maya pretended to check her phone while listening to the conversation continue behind her. "Maybe give her a chance," suggested Jessica, who had been sitting nearby. "Right," Derek scoffed. "I'm sure she's very nice. But I've been here 8 years and I've seen this movie before. 6 months from now she'll present some recommendations that sound great in theory, but fall apart when they meet reality." As Maya finally stood to leave, she caught Derek's eye. He offered a polite nod, the kind of professional courtesy that barely masked his true feelings. She nodded back, maintaining the friendly demeanor of someone who was just trying to do her job. Walking back through the office, Maya reflected on what she'd observed. The technical talent was clearly there. She could see it in the quality of work on people's screens, in the sophisticated discussions she'd overheard about complex problems. But there were also cultural issues that needed addressing, assumptions being made, and communication gaps that could be bridged. As she settled into the temporary workspace Tom had arranged for her, Maya opened her laptop and began typing her first set of observations. Day 1 was complete, but this was just the beginning of what promised to be a very enlightening few weeks. The second week at TechFlow Dynamics started with Maya arriving early, hoping to catch the office in its natural rhythm before the formal workday began. She had learned that the real culture of any company revealed itself in these quiet moments, in the casual conversations over coffee, in the way people prepared for their day, in the energy that built as the office filled up. She found Derek already at his desk, surrounded by 3 monitors displaying different debugging windows. His coffee cup suggested he'd been there for a while, probably tackling one of those stubborn problems that kept engineers up at night and brought them in early the next morning. Morning, Maya said as she passed his workstation, heading toward the kitchen area. Derek looked up, his expression neutral but not unfriendly. Morning. You're here early. I like to get a feel for how places work when they're not putting on a show, Maya replied honestly. Smart approach, Derek admitted, then gestured at his screens. Though some of us are here early because code doesn't care what time it is when it decides to break. Maya paused, genuinely interested. What kind of problem? Derek's eyebrows raised slightly as if surprised by the question. Integration issue between our payment system and the new authentication module. Everything worked fine in testing, but production environments have a way of finding problems you never expected. The classic, but it works on my machine situation, Maya said with a knowing smile. Exactly. Derek's guard seemed to drop just a fraction. You've dealt with this kind of thing before? More times than I care to remember, Maya replied. Production environments are like that friend who only tells you what they really think after you've made a major decision. Derek actually chuckled at that. That's surprisingly accurate. Maya got her coffee and returned to her temporary desk, but the brief interaction stayed with her. Derek wasn't inherently hostile. He was just protective of his work and skeptical of outsiders who might not understand the complexities he dealt with every day. It was a reasonable position, even if his methods of expressing it weren't always professional. Over the next few days, Maya made it a point to attend various team meetings. She sat in on sprint planning sessions, code reviews, and project status updates. Her role was supposedly to observe and ask questions about processes, but she found herself genuinely engaged with the technical challenges the teams were facing. During a particularly intense debugging session, she watched Derek lead a group of junior developers through a complex performance issue. His teaching style was actually quite good, patient, thorough, and focused on helping people understand not just what to fix, but why the problem existed in the first place. The thing about optimization, Derek was explaining to Jessica and two other junior developers, is that you can't just throw more hardware at every problem. Sometimes the most elegant solution is completely redesigning how you approach the task. Maya found herself nodding along, remembering similar conversations from her own engineering days. Derek knew his stuff, and he cared about developing the people on his team. But she also noticed how his demeanor changed when he saw her listening in. Sorry, Derek said, his tone shifting slightly. I'm sure this is pretty technical for someone focused on operational efficiency. There it was again. The assumption that she couldn't possibly understand the technical aspects of what they were doing. Maya kept her expression neutral, but made another mental note about the cultural issues she'd need to address. Actually, I find technical discussions fascinating, Maya replied. Please don't let me interrupt. Derek continued with the explanation, but Maya could sense his discomfort. He kept glancing her way as if waiting for her to prove that she didn't belong in the conversation. The breaking point came during a project review meeting on Wednesday. Maya had been invited to observe how the company handled project planning and resource allocation. The meeting included Derek, two other senior engineers, the project manager Lisa Park, and the head of product development, Kevin Torres. The project in question was a major update to the company's core platform, something that would affect every customer and required careful coordination between multiple teams. Maya listened as they discussed timelines, potential risks, and resource requirements. I think we're being too conservative with the timeline, Derek was saying. We've built in buffer time that we probably don't need, and the client is already asking about accelerating delivery. Buffer time exists for a reason, Lisa responded. The last thing we want is to promise something we can't deliver. Maya had been listening quietly, but she saw an opportunity to contribute something valuable. What if you approached it with parallel development streams? She suggested. You could start the front-end redesign while the back-end team finalizes the API changes. The room went quiet. Kevin looked intrigued, but Derek's expression darkened. That's actually not a bad idea, Lisa said slowly. We could save probably 3 weeks if we structured it right. Derek shifted in his chair. It sounds good in theory, but you'd need really tight coordination between teams. One small change in the API structure could require redoing weeks of front-end work. True, Maya acknowledged. But with proper documentation standards and regular sync meetings, you could manage that risk. I've seen similar approaches work well in other companies. Other companies, Derek repeated, his voice taking on an edge. Right. Well, this isn't other companies. This is TechFlow, and we have our own way of doing things that actually works. The tension in the room was suddenly palpable. Kevin cleared his throat awkwardly, while Lisa looked between Derek and Maya with obvious discomfort. I think what Derek means, Lisa said diplomatically, is that we need to be careful about changing our established processes too quickly. But Derek wasn't done. What I mean is that it's easy to suggest solutions when you're not the one who has to implement them. Consultants love to come in with textbook answers that fall apart the moment they hit reality. Maya felt every eye in the room on her. This was a critical moment. How she responded would set the tone for every interaction that followed. You're absolutely right to be cautious, she said calmly. Any process change should be thoroughly evaluated. I was just offering a perspective based on similar challenges I've seen. Similar challenges, Derek said with barely concealed frustration. How many software development projects have you actually managed? The question hung in the air like a challenge. Maya could feel the weight of everyone's expectations. She could easily shut Derek down with her actual credentials, but that would defeat the entire purpose of her being here undercover. I've been involved in quite a few over the years, she said diplomatically, but you're right that every company has its own culture and constraints. Derek sat back in his chair, clearly interpreting her response as confirmation that she was out of her depth. Exactly. So maybe we should stick to what we know works. The meeting continued, but the dynamic had shifted. Derek had essentially dismissed Maya's input, and while the others looked uncomfortable about his approach, no one challenged him directly. Maya made notes about everything, not just Derek's behavior, but how the rest of the team responded to conflict, how decisions were made, and what kinds of voices were valued or dismissed. After the meeting, Maya overheard Derek talking to Brad in the hallway. I tried to be diplomatic, Derek was saying, but come on, she's clearly not technical, and now she's trying to redesign our development process after being here for a week. Maybe she has a point, though, Brad replied hesitantly. About parallel development? Sure, it's software engineering 101. But implementing it here with our codebase and our team structure, she has no idea what she's talking about. Maya continued walking, but Derek's voice carried. This is exactly what I was afraid of. Management brings in these consultants who've read all the right books and attended all the right seminars, but they've never had to debug a memory leak at 3 a.m. or explain to a client why their feature request would require rebuilding half the system. Over the following days, Derek's attitude became increasingly problematic. He made pointed comments during meetings, often prefacing them with phrases like, "Those of us who actually build things," or "people who understand the technical reality." He never directly attacked Maya, but his implications were clear to everyone in the room. Maya watched how this behavior affected the team dynamics. Jessica became noticeably quieter in meetings when Derek was present. Lisa started asking Maya fewer questions, seemingly afraid of triggering another confrontation. Even Kevin began routing technical discussions around Derek rather than through him. The situation reached a new level during Friday's team lunch. Maya had joined a group of employees at a nearby restaurant, hoping to get a sense of how people talked about work in a more relaxed setting. The conversation was flowing naturally until Derek arrived late and took a seat across from her. "So Maya," Derek said after ordering his food, "I'm curious about something. What's the biggest technical project you've personally managed from start to finish?" The question was clearly designed to put her on the spot in front of the team. Maya could feel the discomfort around the table as people realized what Derek was doing. "I've worked on quite a few projects over the years," Maya replied evenly. "Each one taught me something different." "That's not really an answer, though, is it?" Derek pressed. "I mean, if someone asked me about my biggest project, I could tell them about the complete platform migration we did 2 years ago. 18 months, 40-person team, 0 downtime cutover. What's your equivalent?" Maya took a sip of her water, buying herself a moment to think. She could easily list projects that would impress Derek, systems that served millions of users, teams she'd built from scratch, technical challenges that would make his platform migration look simple. But doing so would raise questions about why someone with that background was doing operational efficiency consulting. "I think different people define biggest differently," she said. "Sometimes the most important project is the smallest one. The one that solves exactly the right problem at exactly the right time. Derek leaned back in his chair with a satisfied expression. Right, so no major technical projects then? Jessica looked mortified. Lisa was studying her salad like it contained the secrets of the universe. Only Kevin seemed willing to meet Maya's eyes, and his expression was apologetic. Derek, Kevin said carefully, maybe we should talk about something else. I'm just trying to understand what qualifies someone to advise us on technical processes, Derek replied. Seems like a reasonable question. Maya smiled, but there was steel beneath it. It absolutely is. And when the time is right, I'm happy to discuss my background in detail. Something in her tone made Derek pause, as if he'd heard something unexpected. But the moment passed and he shrugged. Looking forward to it, he said, turning his attention to his lunch. The rest of the meal was awkward, with forced conversations about weekend plans and office gossip. Maya participated politely, but she was thinking about everything she'd observed over the past week and a half. Derek's behavior was creating a toxic environment that went far beyond just his interactions with her. He was undermining team cohesion, discouraging junior developers from speaking up, and establishing a culture where questioning authority, even constructively, was met with hostility. As they walked back to the office, Jessica fell into step beside Maya. I'm really sorry about that, Jessica said quietly. Derek's not usually that direct. Don't apologize for someone else's behavior, Maya replied gently. But I am curious, is this typical for how he handles disagreements? Jessica glanced around nervously before answering. He's very passionate about the technical work. Sometimes that comes across as intense. Maya nodded, understanding what Jessica wasn't saying. Derek's behavior was tolerated because he was technically skilled, and people had learned to work around his personality rather than address it directly. As they entered the office building, Maya realized that her time undercover was revealing exactly what she'd hoped it would. Not just the surface-level issues that could be addressed with policy changes, but the deeper cultural problems that required leadership, intervention. The question now was, how much more evidence she needed before revealing who she really was. The monthly all-hands meeting was scheduled for a Thursday morning, and Maya could feel the anticipation building throughout the office. These company-wide gatherings were always significant events at TechFlow Dynamics, opportunities for leadership to share updates, celebrate achievements, and address any concerns that had been bubbling up from the various teams. Maya arrived at the main conference room early, choosing a seat about halfway back where she could observe both the speakers and the audience reactions. She watched as employees filed in, noting the familiar social patterns she'd observed over the past 2 weeks. Derek entered with his usual group of senior engineers, settling into seats near the back where they could whisper commentary without being easily overheard. Jessica waved at Maya from across the room before sitting with the other junior developers. Lisa and Kevin took seats closer to the front, along with other managers and team leads. The room gradually filled with the quiet buzz of conversations about current projects, weekend plans, and industry news. Robert Sterling entered exactly on time, followed by the other executives. Maya felt a moment of surreal disconnection. In just a few more weeks, she would be standing where Robert was now, addressing these same employees as their new leader. But for now, she remained in her role as the mysterious consultant who was still learning how the company really worked. Good morning, everyone, Robert began, his voice carrying easily through the room's excellent acoustics. Thank you all for taking time out of your busy schedules. I know these monthly meetings sometimes feel like interruptions, but they're important for keeping everyone aligned on where we're headed. He launched into the usual updates, quarterly financial results that showed steady growth, new client acquisitions that would mean expanded teams, and upcoming product releases that represented months of hard work from various departments. Maya listened with the dual perspective of someone who understood the business context behind these announcements and someone who was observing how employees reacted to the information. I also want to address something that's been coming up in various feedback channels, Robert continued. Our commitment to diversity and inclusion isn't just about checking boxes or meeting quotas. It's about building a stronger, more innovative company by bringing together people with different perspectives and experiences. Maya noticed Derek shift in his seat and exchange a look with Brad. Several other employees seemed to perk up with interest. This was clearly a topic that had been generating discussion throughout the company. "I know change can be uncomfortable," Robert said, "and I know some of you have concerns about how we balance our commitment to diversity with our standards for technical excellence. I want to be clear that these aren't competing priorities. Excellence comes from having the best people, and the best people come from everywhere." The room was quiet, but Maya could sense the tension beneath the surface. This was clearly a response to conversations and concerns that had been happening throughout the company, possibly including some of Derek's more vocal complaints. "We're also continuing to invest in leadership development and cultural improvement initiatives," Robert added. "Some of you have met Maya Chen, who's been working with us on operational efficiency. Her insights into our processes and culture will help us become an even better place to work." Maya felt dozens of eyes turn toward her, and she offered a polite wave. Derek's expression was unreadable from her position, but she could see him leaning over to whisper something to Brad. "Now," Robert said, "I'd like to open things up for questions. This is your opportunity to ask about anything: our direction, our policies, your concerns or suggestions for improvement." Several hands went up immediately. The first few questions were straightforward. Clarifications about the new project timelines, questions about the health insurance changes, and a suggestion about improving the office coffee situation that got a few laughs. Then Maya saw Derek's hand go up. "Derek Walsh, senior engineer," he said when Robert called on him. "I have a question about our hiring and consulting practices." Maya felt her stomach tighten slightly. Something in Derek's tone suggested this wasn't going to be a simple clarification question. "Of course," Robert replied. "What's on your mind?" Derek stood up, which was unusual for these Q&A sessions. Most people asked their questions from their seats, but Derek clearly wanted to command attention. "I've been with TechFlow for 8 years," Derek began, his voice carrying clearly through the room. "I've seen us grow from a small startup to the company we are today. I've put in countless hours debugging critical systems, mentoring junior developers, and ensuring our clients get the quality they expect from us." Maya could see where this was heading, and she felt a mixture of dread and anticipation. The room had gone completely silent, with everyone focused on Derek's words. "Over the past few weeks, I've watched as we bring in consultants and new hires who, frankly, don't seem to understand what we actually do here," Derek continued. "People who ask theoretical questions about our processes, but have never had to implement those processes under real-world constraints." Several people in the room were looking uncomfortable now. Jessica was staring at her hands while Lisa kept glancing between Derek and Maya with obvious concern. "I'm all for diversity," Derek said, his voice growing more confident as he warmed to his topic. "But not when it comes at the expense of competence. Not when we're wasting company resources on people who are clearly out of their depth just because it looks good on our company website." Maya felt the room's energy shift dramatically. Some people were nodding along with Derek's words, while others looked shocked by his directness. Kevin was shaking his head slightly, but he wasn't interrupting. "I think what concerns me most," Derek continued, now clearly addressing the entire room rather than just Robert, "is that we seem to be prioritizing image over substance. We're bringing in consultants who've never written production code to advise us on technical processes. We're hiring people based on what they represent rather than what they can actually contribute." Maya realized that Derek was looking directly at her now, making it clear to everyone in the room exactly who he was talking about. The personal nature of his attack was becoming unmistakable. "Derek," Robert said, his voice carrying a warning tone, "I think you might want to be more specific about your concerns rather than making general statements." But Derek was clearly past the point of backing down. "Fine, let's be specific. We have consultants here who can't answer basic questions about their technical background. People who suggest process changes but have never managed a real development project. And we're supposed to pretend that's valuable input because it fits with our diversity goals?" The room was completely silent now. Maya could feel every person's attention focused on the drama unfolding between Derek and management. She realized this was a defining moment, not just for her undercover mission, but for the entire company culture. "I've worked with some brilliant engineers over the years," Derek continued, his voice growing more passionate. "People who earned their positions through skill, dedication, and proven results. And it's frankly insulting to those people when we lower our standards just to improve our demographics." Maya felt a surge of anger. but she kept her expression neutral. This was exactly the kind of behavior she'd been documenting, but experiencing it directly in front of the entire company was both infuriating and illuminating. "What I want to know," Derek said, turning back toward Robert, "is when we're going to get back to focusing on actual qualifications instead of checking diversity boxes. When are we going to admit that some of these recent hires and consulting arrangements are mistakes that are wasting everyone's time and money?" Robert's face had gone through several color changes during Derek's speech. "Derek, I think you need to sit down and we need to have a private conversation about appropriate ways to express concerns." "Why?" Derek shot back. "This is supposed to be an open forum for questions and feedback. I'm giving feedback. I'm telling you that morale is suffering because people can see what's happening. We're all supposed to pretend that obvious diversity hires are just as qualified as people who actually earned their positions." Maya decided she'd heard enough. She stood up slowly, aware that her movement would draw attention from everyone in the room. "Excuse me," she said, her voice calm but carrying clearly through the space. "I have a question too." Derek turned toward her and Maya could see a flash of satisfaction in his expression. He clearly thought she was about to defend herself in a way that would prove his point about her lack of qualifications. "Derek," Maya said, looking directly at him, "you mentioned that you've been here for 8 years and have significant experience with technical projects. That's impressive, and I respect the dedication that represents." Derek nodded, apparently pleased that she was acknowledging his credentials. "My question is this," Maya continued. "In those 8 years, how many people have you mentored who didn't look like you? How many hiring decisions have you influenced? And how confident are you that your definition of qualified isn't unconsciously excluding people who could contribute significantly to this company?" The question hung in the air like a challenge. Derek's expression shifted as he realized that Maya wasn't backing down or defending herself, but was instead questioning his assumptions. That's not the point," Derek said, clearly thrown off balance. "Qualifications are qualifications. They're objective, are they?" Maya asked. "Because from what I've observed over the past few weeks, there seems to be a pretty narrow definition of what qualifications matter here. Technical skills are important, absolutely, but so are communication skills, leadership potential, creative problem solving, and the ability to work effectively with diverse teams." Derek's face was reddening now. Those are nice buzzwords, but at the end of the day, either you can build systems that work or you can't. Either you understand the technical challenges we face or you don't. "You're absolutely right," Maya agreed. "Technical competence is essential. But I'm curious about something else. In your 8 years here, how has the company grown? How has the technical complexity of your projects increased? And do you think that growth happened because everyone involved looked and thought exactly the same way?" Derek was clearly frustrated now. "Look, I don't know what game you're playing, but this is exactly what I'm talking about. Instead of answering simple questions about your technical background, you're deflecting with questions about diversity and team dynamics." Maya smiled, and there was something in that smile that made several people in the room sit up straighter. "You want to know about my technical background?" she asked. "That's fair. You deserve to know who's been observing your work and asking questions about your processes." Robert was watching this exchange with fascination and growing concern. He clearly hadn't expected the morning's meeting to turn into a direct confrontation between Derek and Maya. "I'd love to hear about it," Derek said, crossing his arms. "Because frankly, I think it's time for some honesty about what qualifications actually mean." Maya nodded thoughtfully. "You're right. It is time for honesty. Complete honesty." She paused, looking around the room at all the faces turned toward her. Jessica looked terrified. Lisa appeared to be holding her breath. Kevin was leaning forward with intense interest. "You want to know about my background, Derek?" Maya said, her voice carrying a new authority that seemed to fill the room. "Let's talk about backgrounds. Let's talk about qualifications. Let's talk about what really matters when you're trying to build something meaningful." Derek nodded, clearly thinking he was about to get the confirmation he'd been seeking. "But first," Maya continued, "I have one more question for you. In all your technical expertise, in all your years of experience, in all your concern about maintaining standards, have you ever considered that maybe, just maybe, you don't know everything there is to know about the people around you?" The room was completely silent now, and Maya could feel the weight of everyone's attention. This was the moment she'd been building toward for weeks. the culmination of everything she'd observed and experienced. Derek's expression showed confusion, mixed with growing irritation. "What's that supposed to mean?" Maya's smile grew wider, and for the first time since arriving at TechFlow Dynamics, she let her true confidence show through. "It means, Derek, that tomorrow morning is going to be very interesting for both of us." Friday morning arrived with an unusual tension hanging over the TechFlow Dynamics office. Word had spread quickly about the confrontation between Derek and Maya during the previous day's all-hands meeting. Employees arrived at work with the kind of anticipatory energy that suggested everyone knew something significant was about to happen. Maya arrived at her usual time, but today felt different. She'd spent the evening preparing for what would be her final day undercover, reviewing her notes and thinking about how to handle the transition from observer to leader. The past few weeks had given her invaluable insights into the company's real culture, but now it was time to start addressing the problems she'd identified. Derek was already at his desk when she passed, but unlike previous mornings, he didn't acknowledge her presence. His body language suggested someone who was still processing the previous day's events and wasn't entirely sure what to make of Maya's cryptic final comment about Friday morning being interesting. Jessica approached Maya's temporary workspace shortly after 9 o'clock, carrying 2 cups of coffee and wearing an expression of concerned curiosity. "I brought you coffee," Jessica said, setting 1 cup down beside Maya's laptop. "I hope you don't mind me asking, but are you okay after yesterday?" Derek was pretty intense. Maya accepted the coffee gratefully. "Thank you, that's very thoughtful. And yes, I'm fine." Derek was passionate about his concerns, which I can respect even if I don't agree with how he expressed them. "He's usually not quite that public about his opinions," Jessica said quietly. "I think seeing you get questioned about your background upset him more than usual. He's been pretty vocal about consultants and new hires over the past few months." "What do you mean by vocal?" Maya asked, genuinely curious about Jessica's perspective. Jessica glanced around nervously before answering. "He's made comments about some of the recent hires, questioning whether they're really qualified or if they were just diversity picks. It makes some of us uncomfortable, especially the newer employees." Maya nodded thoughtfully. "How do other people typically respond when he says things like that?" "Most people just stay quiet," Jessica admitted. "Derek's been here a long time and he really does know his stuff technically. I think people are afraid that challenging him might hurt their careers, especially the junior developers." This conversation was confirming many of Maya's observations about the company culture. Derek's behavior wasn't happening in isolation. It was creating a ripple effect that influenced how other employees felt about speaking up, asking questions, or challenging established ideas. "Jessica," Maya said carefully, "how would you feel if someone in leadership addressed these kinds of concerns directly? Would that make the workplace more comfortable for you and other junior employees?" Jessica's eyes lit up with hope. "Honestly, it would be amazing, but I can't imagine anyone confronting Derek directly. He's too valuable to the company, and he has too many allies among the senior engineers." Maya smiled mysteriously. Sometimes change comes from unexpected directions. Their conversation was interrupted by an announcement over the office intercom. "Attention all employees. Please join us in the main conference room at 10 o'clock for an important company announcement. This is mandatory for all staff." Jessica looked puzzled. "That's weird. We just had the monthly all-hands yesterday. Why would they call another meeting so soon?" Maya closed her laptop and gathered her things. "I guess we'll find out in a few minutes." As they walked toward the conference room, Maya could feel the curiosity and speculation building throughout the office. Employees were clustering in small groups, sharing theories about what kind of announcement required such short notice. Some worried it might be layoffs or restructuring. Others wondered if it was related to the tension from yesterday's meeting. Derek was among the last to enter the conference room, his expression suggesting skepticism about whatever management felt was important enough to interrupt everyone's work. He took a seat in his usual spot near the back, surrounded by other senior engineers who shared his general attitude about corporate announcements. Robert Sterling entered the room with an energy that was different from his usual presentations. There was an anticipation in his demeanor that suggested he was genuinely excited about what he was about to share. "Thank you all for gathering on such short notice," Robert began. "I know this is unusual, But today marks a significant milestone for TechFlow Dynamics, and I wanted to share this moment with all of you together. The room was completely quiet, with every person focused on trying to understand what was coming next. As many of you know, I've been planning my retirement for several months now. Leading this company has been one of the greatest privileges of my career, but it's time for fresh leadership to take us into our next phase of growth. Maya could see people exchange glances around the room. Retirement announcements usually came with more advance notice and ceremony, not emergency Friday morning meetings. Today, I'm excited to introduce you to the person who will be taking over as Chief Executive Officer of TechFlow Dynamics, Robert continued, his voice building with enthusiasm. Maya stood up slowly from her seat in the middle of the room. The movement caught everyone's attention, and she could see confusion beginning to register on faces throughout the conference room. "I'd like you all to meet Maya Chen," Robert said, gesturing toward her as she began walking toward the front of the room, "your new CEO." The silence that followed was unlike anything Maya had ever experienced. It was the sound of an entire room of people having their understanding of reality completely reorganized in real time. Derek's face went through a remarkable series of expressions: confusion, disbelief, and then something that looked like genuine panic as the implications began to sink in. Jessica's mouth had fallen open in shock. Lisa was staring at Maya with wide eyes that suggested she was rapidly replaying every interaction they'd had over the past few weeks. Kevin was nodding slowly, as if pieces of a puzzle were finally clicking into place for him. Maya reached the front of the room and turned to face the employees she would now be leading. The woman who had spent weeks being dismissed as an unqualified consultant was now revealed as one of the most accomplished executives in the industry. Maya brings over 15 years of experience in technology leadership, Robert continued, his voice filled with pride. She was most recently the Vice President of Engineering at Dataflow Solutions, where she led a team of over 200 engineers and oversaw the development of systems that serve more than 50 million users globally. Derek looked like he was having trouble breathing. The consultant he'd been dismissing for weeks had credentials that dwarfed his own experience. "She holds multiple patents in distributed systems architecture," Robert went on, "and she's been recognized as one of the top technology leaders under 40 by several industry publications. More importantly for us, she chose TechFlow specifically because she believes in our mission and our potential." Maya stepped forward to address the room for the first time as their leader. "Thank you, Robert," she said, her voice carrying an authority that no one in the room had heard before. "And thank you all for the warm welcome you've given me over the past few weeks." She paused, letting that statement sink in. "I spent those weeks learning about this company not from PowerPoint presentations or executive summaries, but from working alongside you, observing your processes, and understanding your culture from the ground up." Maya's eyes found Derek in the crowd. He was staring at her with an expression of complete mortification. "I've had the opportunity to see TechFlow's incredible technical capabilities firsthand," she continued. "The quality of work being done here is truly impressive. But I've also observed some cultural challenges that we need to address together." The room remained silent, but Maya could sense that people were hanging on every word. "Excellence in technology requires more than just technical skills," Maya said. "It requires collaboration, respect for diverse perspectives, and the humility to recognize that the best ideas can come from anywhere and anyone." Derek was visibly struggling with the realization that every dismissive comment he'd made, every assumption about her qualifications, every public challenge to her credibility had been directed at the person who was now his boss. "Over the next few weeks, I'll be meeting with each of you individually to discuss your experiences here, your career goals, and your ideas for how we can make TechFlow an even better place to work," Maya continued. "I'm particularly interested in hearing from employees who might have felt that their voices weren't being heard or their contributions weren't being valued." Jessica was staring at Maya with a mixture of awe and excitement. Several other junior employees were sitting up straighter, as if they'd just realized that someone in leadership actually understood their experiences. "I also want to address something directly," Maya said, her tone becoming more serious. "During my time here, I've observed behavior that falls short of the professional standards we need to maintain. dismissing colleagues based on assumptions about their backgrounds, creating hostile environments for people who don't fit certain preconceptions, and using technical expertise as a weapon to shut down legitimate discussions about improving our workplace. Derek had gone pale. Every person in the room knew exactly what Maya was referring to, and many of them were looking in his direction. These behaviors don't just hurt individual employees, Maya continued. They hurt our ability to innovate, they damage team cohesion, and they ultimately make us less competitive in an industry that demands the best from everyone. Maya paused, allowing her words to resonate throughout the room. The good news is that these are solvable problems. Excellence and inclusivity aren't competing values. They're complementary ones. The most innovative companies are the ones that create environments where everyone can contribute their best work. Robert was watching Maya with obvious admiration. This was exactly the kind of leadership he'd hoped she would bring to the company. I know this transition might feel sudden, Maya said, but I want you to know that every decision I make will be based on what's best for TechFlow's long-term success and for the people who make that success possible. She looked directly at Derek again. That includes making sure that every employee feels respected, valued, and able to focus on doing their best work without dealing with unnecessary workplace drama. Derek appeared to be contemplating whether it was possible to disappear into his chair entirely. Robert will be staying on for the next month to help with the transition, Maya concluded. But starting Monday, I'll be fully assuming my responsibilities as CEO. I'm excited about our future together, and I'm looking forward to working with all of you to build something truly exceptional. The room erupted in applause. Though the enthusiasm varied significantly depending on where people were sitting, Jessica was clapping enthusiastically, as were many of the junior and mid-level employees. The senior engineers around Derek were clapping politely but with obvious uncertainty about what this change meant for them. Derek himself was not clapping at all. He was sitting motionless, staring at Maya with the expression of someone who was still processing the magnitude of his miscalculation. As the applause died down, Maya smiled at the room with genuine warmth. I know you all have work to get back to, but please don't hesitate to reach out if you have any questions or concerns. My door will always be open. People began filing out of the conference room, but the energy was completely different from the previous day's meeting. There was excitement, nervousness, and a sense that everything was about to change. Derek remained in his seat as the room emptied around him, apparently unable to process what had just happened. Brad and the other senior engineers filed past him with concerned looks, but none of them seemed to know what to say. Jessica approached Maya as she gathered her things from the podium. I can't believe it, Jessica said, her voice filled with amazement. You were the CEO the whole time? Maya smiled. I was the incoming CEO, learning about the company I was about to lead. It's been incredibly valuable to see how things really work here. Derek must feel terrible, Jessica said, glancing back toward where Derek was still sitting. Derek is about to learn some important lessons about assumptions and professional behavior, Maya replied diplomatically, but that's a conversation for Monday morning. As Maya left the conference room, she could feel the weight of leadership settling on her shoulders. The undercover phase was over. Now the real work of transformation could begin. Monday morning at TechFlow Dynamics felt like the first day of a completely new company. Word about Maya's true identity had spread throughout the building over the weekend, creating an atmosphere of anticipation and nervous energy that was almost tangible. Employees arrived earlier than usual, conversations were quieter, and everyone seemed to be waiting for the other shoe to drop. Maya arrived at 8 o'clock sharp, carrying her cell. With the confident bearing of someone who no longer needed to hide her authority. She'd spent the weekend reviewing personnel files, preparing for difficult conversations, and planning the cultural changes she wanted to implement. Today would set the tone for everything that followed. Derek's desk was empty when Maya passed through the main office area. Several employees glanced up from their workstations, offering polite nods and nervous smiles. The artificial barrier between Maya the consultant and Maya the CEO had been permanently removed, and everyone was still adjusting to the new reality. Jessica approached Maya's office, formerly a conference room that had been quickly converted over the weekend, carrying a cup of coffee and wearing an expression of barely contained excitement. Good morning.
Ms. Chen,
Jessica said, then caught herself. Should I call you Miss Chen now? Or CEO Chen? I'm not sure about the protocol. Maya smiled warmly. Maya is fine, just like before. The title doesn't change the fact that we're all here to do good work together. I still can't believe you were the CEO the whole time, Jessica said, shaking her head in amazement. You were so, normal. Like you actually listened to what people said and asked real questions about our work. That's what good leadership looks like, Maya replied. Understanding the business from the ground up, not just from spreadsheets and executive summaries. Their conversation was interrupted by Tom from HR, who appeared in the doorway with a serious expression and a thick folder under his arm. Maya, sorry to interrupt, but we need to discuss the Derek situation. He's requested a meeting for this morning, and there are some procedural issues we need to address. Maya nodded. Of course. Jessica, we'll continue our conversation later. I have some challenging discussions ahead of me. As Jessica left, Tom closed the office door and took a seat across from Maya's desk. Derek arrived about 30 minutes ago, Tom began. He's been sitting at his workstation, but he hasn't touched his computer. His teammates are keeping their distance, and the tension is affecting the entire engineering section. Maya leaned back in her chair. What's his frame of mind? Honestly, he looks like someone who spent the weekend replaying every interaction he had with you over the past few weeks. I think the full impact of his behavior is finally hitting him. Tom opened the folder and spread several documents across Maya's desk. These are the formal complaints we've received about Derek's conduct, dating back over the past 6 months. Some employees were willing to put their concerns in writing, others only reported verbally. Maya reviewed the documents carefully. The pattern was clear and troubling. Multiple employees describing hostile behavior, inappropriate comments about diversity hiring, and a general atmosphere of intimidation around Derek's technical opinions. This is more extensive than I realized, Maya said. How has this been handled previously? Tom looked uncomfortable. To be honest, it's been difficult to address. Derek is highly skilled technically, and management has been reluctant to take strong action. There have been verbal warnings and coaching sessions, but no formal discipline. And how has that approach worked out? Maya asked, though her tone suggested she already knew the answer. It hasn't, Tom admitted. The behavior has actually escalated over time, and we've lost several junior employees who cited the hostile work environment in their exit interviews. Maya set the documents aside and looked directly at Tom. What time is Derek's meeting scheduled? 10 o'clock. He specifically requested to meet with you directly, not through HR channels. That's fine, Maya said, but I want you present for the entire conversation. This needs to be handled properly with full documentation. At exactly 10 o'clock, Derek knocked on Maya's office door. Tom had positioned himself to the side with a notepad, while Maya sat behind her desk with Derek's personnel file open in front of her. Derek entered looking like a man who hadn't slept well in several days. His usual confident bearing was gone, replaced by the posture of someone who knew he was about to face serious consequences for his actions. Please, have a seat, Maya said, gesturing to the chair across from her desk. Derek sat down heavily, then looked directly at Maya for the first time since Friday's revelation. I owe you an apology, he began, his voice quiet but steady. My behavior over the past few weeks was completely unacceptable. I made assumptions about you that were unfair and unprofessional. Maya listened without interrupting, noting the care Derek was taking with his words. I've been thinking about everything I said and did, Derek continued, not just to you but around you. The comments I made to other employees, the way I questioned your qualifications publicly, the things I said at lunch that day. He trailed off, apparently overwhelmed by the magnitude of his miscalculation. I realize now that I wasn't just being disrespectful to you personally, Derek said. I was creating a hostile environment for other employees and undermining the company's values. There's no excuse for that. Maya waited to see if he had more to say, then leaned forward slightly. Derek, I appreciate your apology, and I believe it's genuine, but we need to talk about the bigger picture here. She gestured to the folder of complaints on her desk. Your behavior toward me wasn't an isolated incident. This is a pattern that's been affecting multiple employees for months. People have been afraid to speak up, afraid to challenge your opinions, afraid that their careers would suffer if they disagreed with you. Derek's face grew pale as he realized that Maya wasn't just referring to his treatment of her. The question I need you to help me answer, Maya continued, is whether this pattern of behavior represents who you really are, or whether it's something you're capable of changing fundamentally. Derek was quiet for a long moment, clearly struggling with the implications of Maya's question. I don't know, he said finally. I mean, I want to change. I can see now how wrong I was, how much damage I've caused. But I don't know if saying I'll change is enough after everything that's happened. Maya nodded approvingly. That's actually the most honest answer you could give. Change is hard, especially when it involves examining deeply held assumptions and biases. She opened Derek's personnel file and reviewed it briefly. Your technical contributions to this company have been significant, Maya said. Your work on the platform migration was genuinely impressive, and you've helped develop several junior engineers into strong performers. Derek looked up with a flicker of hope. But technical excellence isn't enough, Maya continued. We need leaders who can collaborate effectively, who can create inclusive environments, and who can help everyone on their team reach their potential. Maya closed the file and looked directly at Derek. Here's what's going to happen. Your employment with TechFlow Dynamics is terminated, effective immediately. Derek's face went completely white. He'd been hoping for another chance, for an opportunity to prove he could change. I understand this is difficult, Maya said, her tone remaining professional but not unkind. But the pattern of behavior documented here is too extensive, and the impact on other employees has been too significant for us to continue this relationship. Derek nodded slowly, apparently too shocked to respond verbally. However, Maya continued, I want you to understand that this decision isn't about revenge or punishment. It's about creating the kind of workplace where everyone can succeed. She leaned forward slightly. You're clearly talented, Derek. But you need to do some serious self-reflection about how you interact with colleagues, how you handle disagreements, and how your behavior affects other people. I hope you'll use this experience as an opportunity for personal growth. Derek found his voice finally. What about references? What about my work here? We'll provide a reference that focuses on your technical contributions, Maya replied. But any potential employer who asks about your departure will receive an honest assessment of the circumstances. Tom handed Derek an envelope containing his severance information and final paperwork. You have the rest of today to clean out your workspace, Tom explained. Security will escort you from the building when you're finished. Derek stood up slowly, still processing what had just happened. Maya, he said, using her first name for the first time since learning her TR. Yui identity. I really am sorry for everything. I believe you are, Maya replied, and I hope you'll remember this conversation whenever you're tempted to make assumptions about people based on what you think you know about them. After Derek left, Maya sat quietly for a few minutes, thinking about the difficult but necessary decision she'd just made. Tom remained in his chair, organizing the paperwork from the meeting. That was handled well, Tom said finally. Firm but fair. The other employees will see that there are real consequences for inappropriate behavior. How do you think the engineering team will react? Maya asked. Honestly, I think most of them will be relieved. Derek's behavior was affecting everyone, not just the people he targeted directly. Over the next few hours, word spread through the office that Derek was cleaning out his desk. Maya made a point of walking through the office, making herself available for conversations with employees who had questions or concerns about the decision. Jessica approached her during one of these walks. Is it true that Derek was fired? Jessica asked quietly. Derek's employment has been terminated, yes, Maya confirmed. I can't discuss the specific details, but I can tell you that creating a respectful workplace environment is one of my top priorities as CEO. Jessica's relief was visible. Does this mean other people can speak up now if they're experiencing problems? Absolutely, Maya said firmly. My door is always open, and we're implementing new processes to make sure everyone feels safe reporting concerns about workplace behavior. As the day progressed, Maya noticed a subtle but significant change in the office atmosphere. Conversations were louder, people seemed more relaxed, and several employees who had been quiet during meetings over the past few weeks were suddenly more engaged and participatory. Brad, one of Derek's former allies among the senior engineers, approached Maya near the end of the day. I wanted to apologize for not speaking up sooner, Brad said. I knew Derek's behavior was problematic, but I was afraid of creating conflict within the team. I understand that position, Maya replied. But going forward, I need everyone to understand that staying silent when you witness inappropriate behavior makes you complicit in creating a hostile environment. Brad nodded seriously. Message received. It won't happen again. That evening, Maya stayed late in her office, reviewing the notes she'd taken during her undercover weeks and planning the cultural changes she wanted to implement. The Derek situation had been necessary but painful. Now she needed to focus on building something positive from the foundation she'd inherited. Tom knocked on her door around 7 o'clock. "How are you feeling about today?" he asked. Maya looked up from her notes. "Tired but optimistic. Removing one problematic employee isn't going to solve all our cultural issues, but it sends a clear message about the standards we expect everyone to maintain." "The response from other employees has been overwhelmingly positive," Tom reported. "Several people have already reached out to schedule meetings with you, and I've heard multiple conversations about how refreshing it is to have leadership that actually addresses problems instead of ignoring them." Maya smiled. "That's exactly what I was hoping to hear." As she finally prepared to leave the office, Maya reflected on the journey that had brought her to this moment. The past few weeks had been challenging, sometimes uncomfortable and occasionally infuriating. But they had also given her insights into the company that she never could have gained from traditional executive onboarding. She thought about Derek, who was probably at home questioning everything he thought he knew about himself and his career. She genuinely hoped he would use this experience to become a better person and a better colleague wherever he landed next. But mostly, she thought about employees like Jessica, who deserved to work in an environment where their contributions were valued and their voices were heard. Building that kind of workplace would require ongoing effort and vigilance. But Maya was confident that TechFlow Dynamics was ready for the challenge. As she turned off the lights in her office, Maya felt the satisfaction of someone who had not only observed problems, but had taken concrete action to address them. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, but tonight, she had successfully established that excellence and respect weren't competing values. They were the foundation upon which truly great companies were built.